Hello, everyone, and welcome to the October 21st episode of the LGS Pod, the Soccer Shorts companion podcast, where we highlight topics that affect local grassroots soccer culture here in our hometown of San Diego, as well as across the U.S. and around the world. I'm John Cross. I'm the founder of Soccer Shorts, and with me tonight, as always, is our co-host Dylan Wilson. Dylan, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. I spent the weekend in Florida, which was my first time going there. And it was, I don't know, it was all right. I think it really reaffirmed my love for the West Coast, though.
Yeah.
More than anything else, yeah.
I have been to Florida a couple of times, and I don't know, growing up in Southern California, you get very spoiled with the weather. So I haven't found anything in a big picture that I like better than living in Southern California. In fact, I don't know if I ever mentioned it on the podcast. That's how I picked my college. I figured where I went to college is very likely where I'd end up living. So I eliminated most of the United States and then ended up coming to college here in San Diego.
Fair enough.
So I had plans early on about where I wanted to live, and that definitely affected my college choice.
Fair enough. Yeah, can't blame you on that one.
Yeah, two quick things as we get started. I also was out of town for the weekend, but I was up at a conference and a teacher's conference, and that was up in LA. But I attended the No Kings March up there in LA as well to participate in all that this weekend. And I'm really hoping we don't have to do too many of these things, but I know deep down in my heart there's going to be a lot more that we're going to have to do to push back on this administration to kind of get back to some semblance again of democracy. But that was my weekend. It was a big focus of it. So I really didn't get much soccer watching or any of my normal stuff going on because that was my big focus.
Yeah, I have to say I'm not good with like identifying myself with like political labels, but I do run in a lot of leftist spaces, especially on the internet, so I see a lot of the reaction, and there is like a small and I guess relatively insignificant portion of like the American left that I would describe as like anti-electoralist, right? And like their whole thing is like protests don't do anything, like it's not the revolution, and I just think that's dumb. And I saw the best counter to that argument I saw this weekend was actually, I think it was the guy who's running to primary Nancy Pelosi, but whatever, that's not really why I'm talking about him. But he talked about how not only is it good because it shows you're not alone in these beliefs, but it also helps build an infrastructure for something potentially larger, right? Or more important or more impactful. Like the mayor of Chicago, I believe, is the first politician anywhere in America to call for a general strike, right? Yeah. And so that, I'm not saying you can draw a line from A, Brandon Johnson calling for a general strike, to B, or like, with the No Kings protest, like, oh, those are one and the same. But the point being that like you need some form of national or broader communication infrastructure and like organizing infrastructure. And I think that made me feel really positive about it because like you said, it's good to feel good, but we know we need to do more. But I think sometimes it's like you don't realize how important the small things were until it's like, you're looking back on them, right? And I think this is one of those things. I think showing out en masse was really important.
Yeah, and I'm sure there will be more coming up, but I guess maybe one more bit of negative news before we get into more of our soccer stuff. We have listeners who listen to us in a variety of places, Apple Podcasts, some through Buzzsprout, which is where we actually host our podcast, a number of the other ones, including Spotify. But I have made the executive decision because of some things Spotify is doing, especially running all the DHS ads and everything else. And part of their ownership is this will be the last episode that's going to go out on Spotify. And this is part of, as you said, paying attention to some of the small things. This is, It was very effective when, I think, very effective when Jimmy Kimmel was, on hiatus, and the big immediate pushback. This is one of those things that we're going to be doing is until things change. This, if you're listening on Spotify, this will be the last podcast that will be published on Spotify until there's some changes. And I know we may lose some listeners, and that's okay by me if we do, but these are, to me, fundamental decisions that each of us have to decide where we are with the current state of the federal government and what we're willing to do in terms of who we're willing to support and not support, and just not to go about business as usual because it's not. So I just wanted to get that out there quickly for anybody who's listening on Spotify. This will be the last episode on there because they are heavily in support of our fascist governments. So we will not be supporting them. Okay, let's go ahead and get into our soccer stuff, which is why people are here, and especially for this particular episode. Had a little bit of difficulty trying to classify this episode. I almost put it as part of our Pro Rel series because we're looking at kind of the overhaul of college soccer for this episode. If you weren't aware, last week, U.S. Soccer released a new white paper that presents some radical recommendations to overhaul college soccer in the United States. So tonight, Dylan and I are going to break down some of those recommendations. We'll debate some of the pros and cons and give our thoughts about, what the future of college soccer, both on the men's side and the women's side, might look like in 2026 and beyond. But before we get into that, as we always do, we'll take a look at some lower league news, some cup news. But first, let's start local. Let's give a huge shout out to SDFC and their winning the Western Conference in MLS. And I think most importantly, as we covered this a couple episodes back, qualification for the CONCACAF Champions League. Yes, they've got a home playoff match this weekend against either Portland or Real Salt Lake. And MLS, I think this first round, they do a 3-game series. So if there's a third game, I think November 2nd is supposed to be the other home game if needed. Winning the Western Conference gives you home field advantage all the way through the Western Conference finals. But again, I think most importantly, it gives you that CONCACAF Champions Cup berth. So huge shout out to them for that accomplishment, and everybody over there in the union and all the people I know part of the supporter group over there. So Dylan, what are your thoughts? I know we're both not huge followers of Major League Soccer, but it is our local team here. What are your thoughts about their accomplishments this season?
Yeah, it's been great. I mean, I don't think anybody really could have possibly expected them to do as well as they've done. But they've made some really shrewd signings. I mean, I don't think anybody had heard of Anders Dreyer before this season, and now everybody's heard of him. So I'm really, like you said, I'm really mostly excited for the people in the union, the people I know who put a lot of their hard work and time into this. And I think it's a good thing for soccer in the city, even though I maybe have some feelings about it. I see the hats and the shirts and stuff everywhere, and that's fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like you said, Champions Cup next year is big. Hopefully they can build on this. And, the thing I'd say is that we've seen a couple new teams in the last, 5 years or so, like burst onto the scene and be really, really hot, and then like not do it in the playoffs, right? And San Diego, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but now is the best points total of a new team ever, right?
I think so, yes.
So, go the next step. Don't choke it in the playoffs. Like, let's go and see what we can do. That'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, and this is, I think, an unfortunate part of our sporting culture here in the U.S. If you don't win, once we do our postseason tournament, which is common in all sports, if you don't win, it's considered a failure.
Hmm.
But there are 16 teams that have made it. 15 of them are going to end their season on a loss, right? It's math. Only one team can win. So you had 16 teams that had, well, actually more than 16 teams. It'll be 16 after these playoff rounds. So I guess we have 18 teams right now. But every one but one is going to end their season with a loss. So,
Yeah,
the statistics and the math are not with you that it's likely. But of course, you've got home field advantage, which is huge, all the way through at least the Western Conference Finals. Now, they would need three teams in the East to lose somewhere along the way: Philadelphia, Miami, and Cincinnati, I believe. All three of those would have to lose somewhere along the way in order for San Diego to have a chance of hosting the finals. So even if they make it to the final, not very likely that they'd be able to host the final. But again,
that's fair.
like
Yeah,
this is the postseason tournament that is common in American sports. I am, as I said before, most happy about the CONCACAF Champions Cup
yeah. Hmm.
berth because
I
I
agree.
think even though it may not be regarded as strongly by mainstream America, I think that is huge for the club.
Well, and I think a lot of the people who are maybe like hopped on the bandwagon, so to speak, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but like people who have kind of gotten into the hype because they've been so good this year, if they are like on that edge where they're like, ooh, this is kind of a fun sport, right? Like I'm
Mm-hmm.
enjoying this. The CONCACAF Champions Cup is going to be what puts them over the edge into like, oh, I
Yeah,
love this sport. Because the way that soccer does the international club competitions is so unlike anything we do in like really any other sport here in America. Like I
yeah,
acknowledge that there are other sports that do that, but here in America, we do the international thing by like letting a couple Canadian teams play in our league, right? So this is such a
right.
unique thing that I think a lot of fans, this will be their first, as SDFC fans, like this will be their first introduction to the way soccer does international club competitions. And
Yeah,
it's like crack. Once you find out how it all works, it's really hard to like. I know that's like a silly phrase, right? But like you know what I mean. It's once you
yeah,
realize that they do that, you're like, oh my god, this is amazing. Like, why do other
right.
sports not do this? I think it's the general reaction. So I'm
Yeah,
excited for SDFC fans who maybe don't quite recognize the gravity of that yet. But also, like, I mean, just from a kind of selfish perspective, like, I would have killed for a chance to go see Loyal play some fucking random team in like Costa Rica or Guatemala or
right.
anywhere, some Caribbean island, doesn't matter. I'd have gone to the ends of the earth. And I know that there are some SDFC fans who feel that way. And for them, I'm like, they're going to have the time of their lives next year, And
They
who
are.
knows? Maybe
Yeah,
they'll do some
it's
damage
going to be awesome.
because they still don't do a group stage in the Champions Cup, right? It's literally just a knockout tournament.
I think in the newest format, it's just straight up knockout rounds.
And
I
that
think
gives you,
it's a home and home,
right.
and then yeah, and they'll seed them,
I
right?
think that gives
So
you a more likelihood of a team you wouldn't expect winning it all than um, like a
yes,
group stage format does. It was in that format that you got your Stowe Bucharests and your Red Star Belgrades winning the European Cup, right? It was after the introduction of the group stage that it really kind of homogenized, and some other things going on. But I digress.
right. Also, we should mention San Diego Wave, you know, clinched a playoff
Yes,
spot as well. Maybe I think still an outside chance they could host the first round playoff match. But they need some help along with a win. They have to win, but they have made the playoffs at a I don't know mediocre year on the field.
yeah, yeah.
Certainly not as strong as they had a couple years ago when they won the Shield. So we'll see if they might get to have a good run of form. Although again, I have not been following them closely, but I get a sense every time I check in, like defense or lack thereof has been a a problem with them all year long.
Yeah, I mean, of the playoff teams, there's only one team that's conceded more goals than them, and that would be Racing Louisville, the 8th seed, have conceded 38. One other team's, actually, to be fair, the 2nd seed has conceded 32, which is what Wave have conceded. But when you're the highest conceding playoff team or one of the highest conceding, that's always a tough spot to be in, like you said.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's switch to some international news. And, we keep talking ahead about the World Cup. Last week, we had mentioned, because it happened earlier in the day, last week when we recorded, that, Trump basically threatened to pull World Cup matches from, left-leaning cities. And everybody had their thoughts about it. And then I think, to a lot of people's surprise, FIFA came out with a statement the next day that basically said, yes, Trump can. So that's going to be interesting to see
Yeah,
how that plays
I
out
would
over
like
the
to
next
say
few months.
that people may be surprised, but it was, and people can go back and listen to last week's episode, the official position of this podcast that FIFA was going to try the whole appeasement tactic and that it wouldn't work out for them in the end, but we did call this. That's all I'm saying.
And then, in other surprising news announced today, I know we texted about it, but we have mentioned on previous podcasts this whole, whether UEFA was going to grant the ability for league matches to be played outside of their home countries. And Serie A wanted to have a match, I believe it was in Perth, Australia, and then La Liga wanted to have a match in Florida coming up in December. And, I don't know why that happened. Anyway, and that was moving forward. Sorry, I don't know why my iPad's going up. I don't know if you can hear that, but it's barking at me. All right, there we go. Lost my train of thought. Anyway, La Liga match in Florida.
Miami, yeah.
And Barcelona, because they were one of the teams that were going to be in, they were talking about, how they were moving forward with this. And then the last I heard, it was in really CONCACAF's hands. And CONCACAF said, we've received the request, we're evaluating it. And that was last week. I think last week, maybe 2 weeks ago. And then it was weird, out of the blue today, and a lot of people may have saw it if you've been on social media, all of a sudden the match has been, I guess, canceled. If you look through the promoter, it's been postponed, and then, Barcelona said it's been canceled. But I didn't get any follow-up, and I know we texted back and forth, and I was getting hints of some things about the government investigating this. So I don't know if you found any new information before, we've been able to start this podcast tonight, but this is going to be interesting to see how this plays out, what the reason is for the cancellation, because it seems to be coming from Spain is the reason it got canceled, and certainly not from Barcelona.
I don't think it was CONCACAF. Like, I'll just say that. I don't have any information beyond what we would have talked about earlier today or that Marco article I sent you. But I have seen people speculating, and, obviously this is like Reddit or whatever, so take it with the large grain of salt it's due. But a lot of people seem to be convinced that this was a reaction to the fan protest, last weekend, 2 weekends ago, whenever that was, where or not even just the fan protest, the players protest, where the players kneeled and didn't play for the first 30 seconds of the game. I think it was a couple weeks ago. And I mean, that was powerful in and of itself, but I think a bit of Streisand effect, the league actually cut to a wide shot of the stadium to try to avoid showing it, and that actually drew even more attention to it. And I think that's a good example of why things like protesting are important, because it helps to dispel narratives that are trying to be creative, right? That oh, the players are okay with this, the fans want this. No, right. Actually, we can all clearly see here the players definitely don't fucking want this. We know the fans don't actually want this. So that was I don't know how much that protest like necessarily swayed this one way or the other, but good on those players for doing that, putting their necks on the line. I think it's hard to say it didn't have any effect, you know.
Yeah, I'll agree. And if it causes this to stop, even though UEFA kind of granted this, and who knows how it's going to play out over the next few years, but I hope, like the Super League, if there is enough fan and player pushback that maybe we won't see this. I really think it is one of the worst things to happen to the global game if these rich clubs, who, I'm going to make a stereotypical statement, but I'm going to say in general, I think the more wealthy the club, and certainly clubs that are owned by owners who maybe are not of the same nationality of the club, it's a wealthy investor who's come in. They're looking at dollar signs. They're looking at how to make more money, how to build a stronger team and be, the best club team out there. I don't think a lot of those owners care whether they ever play a match. I mean, if they own the stadium, it's going to be one thing, but if they can play some games at home and play other games away and make more money, they're going to look at doing that. And I don't think they consider what it's like for the fans or the league that you're in or anything else. Because, if you're Barcelona, why not try to arrange this in such a way that it's an away match for you when you go play in Florida that's going to be
Right.
treated almost like a home match for you, so
Which you
there's
should,
just so much
you know.
manipulation that can happen for a league season to be playing these matches away from your home stadium.
Yeah, and like you said, it does sound like the cancellation of it is coming from the Spanish end, and I do, you do need the government to like recognize and acknowledge and treat these clubs differently than your average business because they have cultural significance. And so I think I mean I don't know much about Spanish politics, but I know that they're going through kind of like a big cost of living crisis that we all are, but mixed in with a very large wave of anti like tourist sentiment, right? And so
Right.
I think maybe the government is stepping in because I think this would be an easy populist slam dunk for them preventing this. It works on both of those two fronts I just said.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see
It will.
how all this plays out. I'm sure we'll be talking about it a lot more in future podcasts, but
Hmm.
let's switch gears and look at something I hope a little more positive, but the 2031 Women's World Cup. It was just announced today that it's the only bid, so I think everybody's assuming this is what's going to happen. But we knew the U.S. had pushed their bid back from the 27 World Cup to the 2031 World Cup. We were wondering if Mexico was going to be involved, and then we heard that Mexico was. But I was surprised because I didn't get any wind when they announced today that it's the U.S. and Mexico, but also Costa Rica and Jamaica, all four countries as co hosts. So, very surprised about Costa Rica and Jamaica. Probably the only way in a bid like this that they're ever going to be able to host men's World Cup matches. And a little surprised Canada was not part of this, although in our political climate, who knows, maybe very understanding why Canada is not a part of this at all. But what are your thoughts about 2031 Women's World Cup coming to the United States? I would say for the most part, probably the majority of the matches will be in the U.S.
I mean, unfortunately, it's much of the same feelings I have towards the one next year. I don't
Yeah.
obviously the scene of the country might be very different at that time, but I don't know, it could be a lot fucking worse too. So I it's really hard to kind of think that far ahead, to be honest.
Yeah. The thought though of going to Jamaica or Costa Rica to go see a World Cup match
That would be cool. That would
is
be a lot of fun.
enticing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I would certainly rather the money I was looking to spend for the 2026 World Cup originally for games. I think maybe just hold on to it and see if I can work out some matches for the 2031 World Cup. And like you said, who knows what our political climate is going to be like. But speaking, I guess, of politics a little bit, and we'll go to New York City. I don't know if you saw this last weekend was the Cost of Living Classic uh,
I did
put
not. That's
out
hilarious.
by it was New York Footy was one of the sponsors, but it was also Zoran Mondani and his campaign that helped put this on. It was done, I think, with relatively short notice. Seemed to be hugely attended. You had Christian, I think, from Cooligans was out there as well. But seems like, and they had people playing 5-on-5 and representing the different boroughs. They did rec kind of tournament and more higher skilled tournament, but it was co-ed. Seemed to be, from everything I saw on social media, loads of fun that people were having. And I think what a, well, in two things, a stroke of genius for the Mamdani campaign to do something like this, to invigorate a lot of the younger crowd and the multicultural crowd in
Yes.
New York City. It seemed to be a great event, and frankly, I'm just loving having a politician that is a soccer fan
Yeah,
first and
100%.
foremost. That understands the game and the implications of the World Cup coming in, because he is and has been a soccer fan and was a soccer player. So that's always nice. So it was fun. It was fun to see it. It seemed like a good little weekend, one day, not even a weekend, 1 day tournament that lasted for about 8 hours. I think like two o'clock in the afternoon till like 10 o'clock or something. And they just seemed to have a lot of fun. So yeah, I wasn't sure if you had heard about that at all, but I thought that was a great little, again, an example of how not just soccer but sport can bring people together and bring communities together. And this is one of the things I love best about this sport are these types of things and how it can be used this way. If we're talking about, not bringing politics into sport, like this is an excellent use of doing that.
Yeah, I think maybe I had heard about that, but I wasn't really aware of the details or that it was part of the Mamdani campaign. That's pretty cool. I know he's a soccer fan. I'm a big fan of his. His politics are, very similar to mine, but more importantly, I think he's like, I don't know, it's either him or some combination of him and his campaign managers, but there's like a generational talent there because they
Yeah.
are so good at what you just described. And it's not even the first thing they've done. They did a scavenger hunt like a
Yes, I saw that.
like a month or two ago. And that's just like it's brilliant and I can't believe nobody's ever done that before or not that I'm aware of. So yeah, I hadn't seen that, but I think that's a wonderful idea and soccer is so popular in New York City. And like
Yes.
I know people will say, well, yeah, obviously they have two MLS teams, but like that's not even what I mean. Like soccer is like the game for the people in New York
Yeah.
City because it's such a multicultural city and it's such a multicultural game, like you said. So yeah, I hadn't heard about that in specific detail, but that's super cool and it makes me like a politician I already liked even more.
Yeah. I think that's fantastic how it was done and put together. And to finish at least our current event kind of segment here in the show with another happy note. I don't know if you saw in Sweden, they have a brand new Swedish champion.
Yes.
I'll see if I can pronounce this right. Mjolby.
Yeah, it'll be
And They
yeah.
they are a tiny town because I'm learning about this as well. I've seen the name. They've been in their first tier for a while, but didn't really give them much thought or attention. Haven't really been following the Swedish season up until the last like maybe a couple weeks, but today with their victory today, they clinched the league title. They're from a tiny fishing village basically of 1,500 people. Their stadium seats 6,000 people.
The stadium, the town they're Mjolby, the town they're ostensibly named for, is so small. The stadium is actually not even in the town. It's in a neighboring larger town.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, it's this. Let me see if I can. It's in the small town of Solvesburg or something like that.
All right.
So, but anyway, just to drive home the point of how small this like little village is.
And I think, and again, a couple of things here. I think there's so many layers into this story. One, great story, right? Kind of an underdog story of a small club competing with the normal giants of Swedish soccer. Has been in the top division for a bit here, quite a few years, but not many if you look at their total existence. So they've made it into the top division this most recent time. There have been a couple other times they've been in the top, but this most recent time they've stayed, and they've slowly really done some good structural things with their club. They run on a tight budget, from what I read. They get a lot of players on free transfers. I don't think they paid more than like $250,000 transfer fee for anyone. Usually it's significantly lower than that. But they have a good coaching system that they've stuck with. And Sweden's one of those places like Germany where you have the 50+1 rule. So the community is bought in, and I think it's a fantastic kind of underdog story that in certain places, let's say the Premier League, you would probably never see happen, but you will in these countries that have the 50+1 rule, because you can't have, at least not in the same way, you can't have, and I think Sweden's restrictions are even tighter than what's in Germany. But you can't have a rich person, nation, personal investment fund, whatever, come in and totally dominate and just spend money like crazy to buy supposedly the best of everything. So I love this story, and also I love how it highlights some of the ridiculousness of our country's professional league standards, because there's no way this team would, I think they might be able to play Division II by our professional league standards. I think you
I
only
don't
need a
think
5,000
so.
seat stadium. I can't remember,
Yeah, that actually might be right. Yeah.
but I can't remember for certain. But so many other factors around it. There's no way it would ever qualify
Well, it wouldn't be
for.
a big enough metro area for D2. Probably
Right, it
not
would
even
not be a big
D3,
enough metro area.
which is ridiculous. But whatever.
Yeah, it's one of those things that um, I love to see this, and the town, as you said, what it's named for, can't even fill up the stadium if everybody was there. But like we see with lots of clubs, you pull from possibly neighboring towns and regions. So I think it's just a great story. It's kind of like Bodo Glimt a little bit in Norway.
Just
We'll,
warmer.
we'll yeah, well, we'll see if they can continue. But I think also with all the technology and other things we have now, it's like the Oakland A's before, the whole Moneyball thing. Like, people are learning to maximize what they have and make shrewd business decisions rather than relying on a rich person to come in and just splash money everywhere
Well,
and
and
try to
that's
outspend everybody else.
that's probably the most frustrating part about why we would never ever even have something like the 50+1 rule here in America, because people would look at that and ask, like, well, if the owners aren't going to make, like, if rich people can't own it, what is the point? And it's
Yeah,
unfortunate that that's the way it's framed here.
right. And I think people are so used to trying to find the wealthy benefactor who's going to be, you know, a benevolent overlord, and they just, yeah, we're just used to that. Like, yes, you have to wait for the rich person to come along, and you know because the community never has any control. You're at the whim of the billionaires.
We're getting political again, John.
Yeah, I know. All right. Um, Let me see. I kind of lost my spot here of where we are. I guess that kind of gets us back into some slight San Diego news, but also U.S. Open Cup qualifying. So again, for the 2026 U.S. Open Cup, qualifying tournament is going on. We both attended round 2 and watched a match between FC Balboa and San Diego Inter. And now the winners are getting ready to play. So we do have the draw. It's happened. The match is going to be SD Inter versus City SC. It'll take place Saturday, November 1st at Mission Bay High School. The kickoff is at 8 p.m.
Oh.
And the winner...
Wait, is that 8 p.m. Eastern or Pacific?
No, 8 p.m. our time because it's 11 p.m. Eastern.
God. All right, maybe I won't be there.
Yeah, it's going to be 8 p.m. Pacific time. And the winner, most likely from this, is going to face the winner of the Irvine FC and Laguna United match, which is going to be played a little earlier on that same day. But we are kind of in the same region of what they've divided. And last year, I think for the final match, it was SD Inter hosting Laguna United, and Laguna won, and they made it to the first round proper of the Open Cup. So we might end up seeing the same two teams in that final match again, but I'm sure City SC will have something to say about that.
So I can go to this game. It is my mother's birthday that day, but she will be out of town. She will be out of town, though, so I can swing it. However, I was made aware of this game and added it to my calendar while I was in Florida. And I didn't do all the mathing about daylight, or not daylight time, but rather time zones. So I was under the impression it was at 5 o'clock. So I mean, I'll still try and be there, but that does change the calculus, unfortunately.
Yes, it does. I'm planning on being there. I hope, again, we'll have to talk to Tony and Chiva from Two Balls and a Mic. I would imagine they're going to be part of the live stream team that helps. So we'll reach out to them as well and see if we can get a group of people to show up. See if we get Ken out there again and a few more people. And it should be a fun match to see who our San Diego representative is going to be for that final round of qualifying for the 2026 U.S. Open Cup.
I think, I'm double checking this, but I think SD Inter actually have a league game this weekend. I'm going to try to go to. It's at Mission Bay High School if you're interested. 7 o'clock on Sunday. Well, still, I might try and swing it. So, yeah, it was a lot of fun going to that game, so I'd like to go watch more of them.
Yeah, we can talk about it after the show and see. I have I might be going up to Orange County for the match up there this weekend. But we'll see.
Yeah, we'll talk.
I have
Sounds
a couple of things up in the air I got to sort out first. But before we close out our 2026 U.S. Open Cup qualifying tournament, we did mention last week there was a protest for one of the matches between Lansdowne Yonkers and Doxa. Doxa lost that match 2-1. They hosted the match. And that first goal, remember we talked about it, and the first goal scored by Lansdowne went in through the side netting because the side netting was not affixed properly to the post. I mean, it was a huge gaping hole that, as the coach from Doxa demonstrated, a person could walk through. Now, Doxa was hosting, so I don't know who checked the nets or what happened or the referees, but the appeal was denied by U.S. Soccer. It was denied. So Lansdowne Yonkers moves on, and they have to look and see who they face. The New York Renegades is who they're going to face. The reasons that the U.S. Open Cup Committee, U.S. Soccer, gave for not really even listening to the appeal was they don't use... VAR is not in play at this stage of the tournament, so they don't use any video evidence to look up for anything, which I understand that from a technicality, but my brain immediately went to, so if you had video of a player punching another player and the refs missed it, you would just say, sorry, we we don't use video evidence, and if it was, like a brutal attack somebody did, I would imagine they would use the video in that situation. Why they didn't use the video here, and it happened so early in the match, but their second reason was, referee's decision is final. In the match, the ref went and talked to the assistant referee and on that side, and they are said it was a goal or didn't say it wasn't a goal or whatever. After their conversation, the referee said goal, and it kicked off and moved on. And I haven't heard if there was any kind of punishment or consequence for the officiating team for not checking the nets, for the home team for not checking like what they put together. There's so many things here that were wrong. I mean, I guess you could say it's the adventure of lower league soccer. But what a brutal way to go out in a game that probably would have ended up in a draw and gone to extra time. You end up losing. The goal clearly goes in through the side netting. You see it on the broadcast footage. There's no doubt. It's not questionable. It's not blurry. The ball goes in around the post through the side netting. The guy who scored it knows. He's sheepishly walking back after he scores. He's not even celebrating. No one's really celebrating. They're probably just crossing their fingers and hoping they don't overrule it, or maybe thinking they are going to overrule it, and then it doesn't. So they just continue with the game. But it's really, I think, disappointed that there wasn't a replay or something else for such a flagrant. I would say
think,
violation. It's not really a violation other than not securing your net properly, but it had an impact on the game. It just, I mean, I feel sorry for Doxa for going out like that. It sucks.
Yeah. I think that whole, like, oh, we don't use video as a cop-out, because it doesn't matter if VAR is in use. That's not the question. That seems to me like a cop-out, and I would guess the reason is because honestly, I think it happening so early in the game might actually have worked against Doxa, whatever the club is. Because I think, honestly, for my guess is U.S. Soccer or whomever is running this looked at that and said, like, I don't know that we want to go and dictate that this game's going to be replayed from the 5th minute. And so they just took the easy out, which was denying the appeal. Because if that is not going to be given on appeal, like, what is even the point of the appeals process? I'm not sure I understand. So I'm guessing is they viewed that as a cop-out because they, for some reason, I'm guessing logistically, didn't want the game to be replayed in that manner.
Yeah, it's a shitty way to go through for Lansdowne and a horrible way to be eliminated for Doxa. Yeah. Well, sticking in Cup news, we did have the NISA Pro Cup that started last week, and as we mentioned on last episode, off to a rocky start with one of the teams abandoning the game at halftime. Didn't really have problems per se, I think, like that the rest of the tournament, although there were some pretty lopsided games in the quality of the teams. But they had their final today. Their final was already, it's done. It lasted just over a week. And you had, I gotta find it here, but
it was an all Southern California affair.
Right. Yeah, all Southern California affair. You had the LA Force 4-1 over Capo FC. Capo FC played shorthanded for about not the last 10 minutes, last 10 minutes of regulation, and then into extra time. So it was 1-1. I saw it when I just checked FootMob, and it was, I think, in the 89th or 90th minute. And I was like, oh, it's going to extra time. And then when I checked back in later after the game was finished, I was a little shocked to see the score 4-1. So LA Force scores 3 goals in extra time to clearly take the victory. I don't know how evenly the match was played at all. I just have the score there. Frankly, did not really check in too much. I when NISA first started, as I've always said, I was a big backer of the idea and what they were trying to do, but I just couldn't muster any interest in this tournament.
No, me neither.
So yeah, I followed some things along on social media, but that's it. And now I don't know what they're going to do and which teams they're going to try to cobble together to try to get a season. And again, I mean, USL is not perfect at all. I always want to qualify some of the things I say with that. But I also think for us in Southern California, with Riverside coming in to USL, Temecula coming in to USL, if you had LA Force and you had Capo FC also in the USL, along with Orange County, I mean, at least right now, 5 teams in the Southern California area. And we could certainly support that and more in Southern California. So I think that I would love to see some of those stronger teams move to USL with their ownerships. I'm not sure that will ever happen. And I really feel bad for some of those ownerships in the sense that there might not be a place for them. Like they're the ones that are trying to cobble this together, to make sure there is a league to play in. But that's our news. NISA Pro Cup started last week, done. And then I guess we're going to wait and see if they get sanctioned by U.S. Soccer, if they get enough teams. So good for them, I guess, getting a tournament going and getting their teams the ability to play. But we'll see where it takes us.
Yeah, I mean, it has generally been the case that the better run teams like Oakland Roots first and then Detroit City following have kind of risen out of NISA into USL. And, LA Force, as far as I can tell, are a pretty well-run club. In all of the iterations of NISA, they've never had issues with stability, as far as I know, while a lot of the other clubs obviously have had issues. So yeah, I think especially like you said, with the benefit of the inclusion of Riverside and Temecula in USL along with Orange County, you could get like a real great SoCal kind of cup sort of dealio, whatever, whether just in name or in actuality. If you wanted to do that, that could be cool. But that's like a really good foundation to build like a regional structure.
Right. And then speaking along those lines of a regional structure and a California Cup, UPSL did announce last week that they are starting a new California Cup, and it's going to be the 2 state organizations, Cal South and Cal North. They're going to find, however they screen the entrants, but there's going to be 16 teams that compete to be the Cal South champion and 16 teams compete to be the Cal North champion. 2 winners will face off for the California Cup champion. And this is open to, now I know there were some misleading things, I think, because of the wording online. Some people were saying because it was open to all adult men's teams, but adult, the way they were using it is adult like the U.S. Adult Soccer Association. So non-professional teams that you're not in Division 1, 2, or 3 that's identified through U.S. Soccer. So if you're outside of that, if you're in anything sanctioned by USASA, or you're, well, I mean, I guess it would be an amateur team, but pretty much anything that falls under USASA sanctioning, or maybe an affiliate sanctioning through U.S. Soccer, which I think is what UPSL is. But you could get amateur teams and semi-pro teams and have them come together for a championship. And again, we certainly have plenty of teams that could compete in this in the state of California. We have enough teams that we could field. I mean, in Southern California alone, if you're talking that level that they're talking for this California Cup, there's, I think, somewhere close to 100 teams that we have. So it would be nice within Cal South if we could regionally organize a structure so these teams can play and get some tiers and have some promotion relegation and get some of these stronger teams to maybe also have a shot at getting the right additional pieces they need together to maybe make it to Division 3 professional level in this country.
Yeah, I mean, like we've talked about, I think there needs to eventually be that bridge between non-professional and professional soccer if we want to build out a true pyramid. And I think I know when you initially sent it to me, I also kind of misinterpreted the adult team thing, thinking any team
Yeah.
could compete. But I think you have to build it, and we kind of talked about this with the USL Cup, right? You have to start somewhere. It has to get done at some point. You have to have the first one. And maybe they don't see it now as a view to like include genuinely all California teams now. But I think building out, like we kind of talked about with the No Kings thing, like building out that infrastructure, those
Right.
connections now can only be a good thing in the long run.
Exactly. And, who knows, maybe we will, like the US Open Cup, at some point be able to also support a California Cup just of our California teams as a separate cup that
As
people.
an independent nation. Oh wait, whoops, wasn't
Oh
supposed to
yeah.
say that. What?
um so anyway, we'll keep an eye on that. Also, this California Cup has come with some controversy, so it's likely in maybe a few episodes from now, as we get closer to the tournament actually happening, we'll probably do a podcast dedicated to this California Cup, what it's going to look like, what teams are in, and some of the controversies around it, because there are people who are not happy about this California Cup happening, and especially being run by UPSL. But I think we'll save that for a future podcast.
Wouldn't be
Um,
California if there weren't a bunch of people saying, "What about me?"
right. Yeah. Um, so let's switch to some USL news, and then we'll finally get into our main topic. But a couple of big things on the men's side for USL. Brian McBride was just appointed as the general manager of Brooklyn FC. Now that's general manager overseeing both the men's and women's team. The women's team already plays in the Super League. The men's team was supposed to launch in 2026 in
Oh,
the
yeah.
USL Championship, and they've just been dead silent. And I think a lot of people thought they were just going to fold up on the men's side. They were just going to have their women's side, or they were going to delay another year. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, comes this announcement that Brian McBride has been hired. And now, I mean, there's been no official word that I've seen from USL, but that everything the club now is talking about is, yeah, they're here to get everything ready and get a team on the field for next year. So men's team on the field, because they already have the women's team, as we said, in the Super League.
I feel like they've delayed that men's team like several times. I feel like they were originally slated to start in like 24 or something like that.
Yeah, I feel like they were too. I don't know if that was the one that David Villa was a part of. There was
No, that was Queensboro, which also
Queensboro.
I don't know
Okay.
what the fuck happened with that. That was supposed to be the
Yeah,
championship.
that was another one that kind of started, and then we didn't know what happened with it. Anyway, Brian McBride as the new general manager. So that's going to be, again, interesting to see how that plays out and whether they're actually going to be able to field a men's team for 2026. We also had news that the Cosmos, the newly rebranded Cosmos, that New Jersey team, and that's going to start next year in League One for USL. They formed several partnerships with some youth clubs in New Jersey, but they also announced today, I think, maybe it was yesterday, that they're doing a partnership with New York International FC. Now, New York International FC is a team that's been in the Open Cup recently. They have a pretty strong program. They also recently merged with another club in the New York area, and they have teams in. They just got promoted to the APSL, so the regional league, and then they have two teams still in the Cosmopolitan Soccer League. And this is, I follow them a lot on social media. They're a club that I really admire the work they do to connect with their community. They've only been around, I think, since 2019, somewhere around there, but they've done a lot to really engage with their community and connect with their community and get people to support. And they've got supporter group culture. And I think it's great to see. And if I remember correctly, I think it was started by a handful of guys, but I think one was British and one was Irish and one was French, and it kind of goes in line with the New York International, right? So you got people from all kinds of areas and backgrounds coming together to make a soccer team in New York, and started in some of the lower leagues. I think the fourth division of the Cosmopolitan Soccer League, and have risen up to the APSL. Okay, and then last news for USL is Ayman Zayed has been announced the head coach of the Corpus Christi FC, which is, again, one of the new League One teams in USL that will start play next year. He was the former head coach of the Northern Colorado Hailstorm back when they had their good runs when they were first formed there in USL 1. So I think that's a huge pickup for Corpus Christi FC, and may make them a good coach who's done well with his teams before, and may make them a decent contender for their first year in the league. So we'll see.
Yeah, and
we'll see how that plays out.
I mean, I don't know if Corpus Christi is right on the border, but it's like the biggest metropolitan area in like the southernmost part of Texas. So you imagine there's a thirst for a pro team down there too. So I hope they're well supported.
Yeah, I hope so too, and we'll see if that happens. So I'm very excited about this upcoming USL season, and especially the League One expanding to 21 teams. And just as a side note, but that we had decision day for MLS this last weekend. Well, the final day of the season, I'm not sure they're really branding it as decision day for the USL Championship or USL League One, but final matches of the season will take place this weekend. So I'll certainly be checking in on those to see, and especially League One. I think at this point, I think we have a game tomorrow that will help solidify stuff. I think it's Portland and Spokane, but we don't know who's going to win the Shield yet. We don't know who's all the teams that are hosting the home playoff matches yet, and there's still, I think, a couple, one or two that might squeak in depending on results, and we don't know who the wooden spoon winner is. So there's a lot up for grabs on the final day of the season for USL League One. So if you're interested, there's a lot of good matches to check out with things on the line this weekend. All right, Dylan, you ready to get into our main topic here?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so for those who might have missed it, U.S. Soccer, well, technically it's the NextGen College Soccer Committee, which is done in partnership with U.S. Soccer. They got together, I think it was announced back in June, to try to look at how to overhaul, reboot college soccer in the U.S., both on the men's and women's side, because of the major changes that were coming down the pipe for paying athletes in college sports. So I think after this committee was actually formed, we finally got the House settlement. And then from there, we had a lot of schools announce the majority of their money was not going to be divided up among all their sports. They were throwing most of it in towards football and men's basketball, maybe women's basketball, depending on the schools. But those were going to be the primary sports that I don't remember what it was, 20 million, 40 million, some amounts that each school was supposed to have for budgeting to compensate athletes. There also was I think, an initial court decision that said Title IX does not apply for this. So there were some sports saying, hey, wait a minute, you need to balance this, like all Title IX. And then that was, the initial court ruling was no. So with all of that, like the landscape for college sports is looking to change severely over the next couple of years. We've already seen the major, changing around of football conferences over the last few years, and the power conferences, even some of them trying to consolidate into even smaller power conferences, maybe more teams, but, concentrate the wealth a little bit. You're getting West Coast teams that are playing a bulk of their games over on the East Coast. And these non, we'll call them non top tier sports, they're not the big revenue generators like soccer, are also feeling the pinch and the problems if your school decides to align to the Big East Conference. And, I don't even know what these names mean anymore with conferences. Usually they made sense regionally, right? But now you got teams playing just all over the place. And some sports like soccer, depending, you may not even play in the conference that every other sport plays in, or most of the sports. You may go affiliate yourself somewhere else. Like I think last year for San Diego State, they were in the Pac. I don't even know what they are now. Are they still the Pac-12?
I don't even know. I thought that
Yeah.
conference was defunct, to be honest.
Well, I think on the football side, but I think on the
Let's
actually, I
see.
don't know if it is on the football side, because things are changing rapidly. Is the bottom line. So, U.S. soccer, which I think for the first time that I can remember in my life, has tried to be proactive in a situation, because for so long I feel like they're always reacting, or maybe they would do something to be proactive in terms of helping Major League Soccer, but really for the sport in general in this country. So I'm glad they helped get this committee started. We're going to break down kind of some of the highlights and the key recommendations in this. I know it's like an 18, 19 page report. It mostly focuses on the men's side, because on the women's side, they, well, we'll talk about a little bit, but they don't want as many changes. And that concerns me actually a lot for the women's game in this country, because I don't think they're seeing the writing on the wall. But anyway, we'll get into some of the details here as we go through. We're not going to go through every bit of the document, but we'll go through some of the key points. So before we dive into the kind of the three big objectives that they identified in here that they wanted to make sure they met in their recommendations, Dylan, do you have anything you want to add before we dive into this?
No, not really. I'm glad that they're finally being proactive. That's a nice change. But I feel like I've heard chatter about this kind of thing in college soccer, just general U.S. soccer before. So I'm not holding my breath, I guess is what I'm saying.
Probably a good idea. All right, let's break it down, and then we'll take a look at some of these recommendations. So there were three objectives that this committee identified that they said must be met for all their recommendations. So the first was financial. Basically, it has to work for the colleges. They're not, there's no college out there, especially for a sport like soccer, that's not a big revenue generator, that's just going to start dumping a bunch of money into the sport. They're not going to do that for any sport. Like, money is going to rule this game moving forward. It already does, but the money was very much in certain people's hands, but now that it's coming out to athletes, and the influence is going to be in other areas, it's going to change how things play out after this house settlement and this transition we're going through. So the first thing is, it's got to be beneficial to the colleges. Otherwise, colleges just might drop the sport, right? So that was one thing they were trying to do. Like, just, it doesn't make good sense for the college to keep their teams. The second is it has to be better for the athlete, better in terms of academics, so they can have time to focus on their academics, and both physically and mentally for athletes. Because if anybody in this country is familiar with how the college season works, it is crammed into a tiny couple of month window. And depending again on your conference, you could be traveling to away matches across the country that you have to play. So it's really affected the ability of student athletes to be students, but also just be athletes and have proper recovery time as well. So that was the other thing they wanted to look at, or second thing. And then the third thing, which here's where I think U.S. soccer in this committee is missing the mark, and they're trying to. Well, let me just give it to you, and then I'll make my comments. So the third thing is talent ID. They want to be able to identify players for national teams and professional teams, and they're really talking like D1 professional teams. Now, college soccer runs very differently on the men's side than the women's side. On the men's side, there's not a whole lot of college players or players coming out of college that are getting Division 1 college soccer or Division 1 opportunities post 4 years of college. If anything, maybe they play for a year or two and they're gone. But anymore on the men's side, people are bypassing college altogether. It's not the development pathway that it is for basketball or football, right? Which is, I think, a model for a lot of people on this committee they want to follow. Now, we flip that over to the women's side. It is very much still like that. There still are a ton of females that come out of the college system and they play, they go straight from college to a professional team or to the national team. And I think we're going to need to build up a little more infrastructure in the women's side of the game with teams outside of the NWSL, especially in order to build up those pathways for women. And I think it is going to happen over the next few years, just like we've seen it on the men's side. But this talent ID process that they identify in the white paper it goes along with a comment that someone made, and I've seen it also shared in a couple of articles I've read about this, is, and I don't remember who said it specifically, but this idea that they want college soccer in the U.S. to be the best under 23 league in the world. And I kind of scratch my head with that a little bit because why? Like, who cares if you're the best under 23 league in the world? In most countries, if players are not affiliated with good, strong professional teams by that age, they're playing lower league or they're moving on with their life doing something else.
Right.
I don't know that having the best under 23 league in the world is a lofty goal. It could be nice to say you have it, but I don't know that that really helps strengthen soccer in your country. What it does is try to preserve college soccer and, what we've had. And I think the people who are on this committee kind of have, in looking at what they put together, my view is they have a hard time letting go of the college system as it's been run for 100 years, which is not going to be the same college system when we look at it 5 years from now. It's going to be drastically different. And I think they're trying to find a way to nudge it into the kind of world's game and the rest of I'll call it a soccer pyramid, but also somehow preserve it and protect people's jobs. And I don't think, if we look back 5 years from now, I don't think any of those will happen, but I'll have some comments about that a little bit later. So before we get into some of the other key points and recommendations, I'll let you jump in.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I hadn't thought that hard about the recruitment, or not recruitment, the talent ID aspect of it. But you make a lot of good points. And it does seem like it fundamentally kind of misunderstands the purpose of like a U23 league or like what that would look like in, the context of world football. So, yeah, I mean, I guess at the end of the day, with a little more context, my reaction is that it's, as a lot of things, seems like it was written by people who don't actually like engage with the thing they're writing about. They engage with college soccer, sure, but not world soccer. They have a cursory understanding.
They had people affiliated with the college game, certainly on this, and they had representatives. They had someone from the USL, and they had Ali Curtis from MLS.
Fair enough.
They did have, and I don't know if Ali Curtis oversees MLS Next Pro. I can't remember what his role is, but you had some people in there, and I think that this feels like this talent ID. It feels a little bit like when we did our episode, a little while back about Project 2010 and having a youth league. I think then it was an under 20 league, wanting to have like a national under 20 league to be able to feed MLS. I think this sounds to me a little bit of MLS influence of, yeah, well, if we can keep these kids in college, or basically, I'll use my cynic voice here. If we can keep them out of USL, keep them in college, and then have them come up to MLS, that would be the thing that would work best for us.
Right.
I could see that because, MLS is a closed league. They have their own teams, their reserve teams, but they don't really want to see a feeder system. And if it could just be college, unless they're coming through their own youth academies, I think MLS would love that, because then, especially if you keep the college game strong as its own closed circuit, then it's not competing directly with MLS. So that's my cynic hat on for that
Yeah,
one.
I mean,
But
yeah, hard not to think about it.
yeah, so here are some of the recommendations. The first is a longer season, the whole year, right? Instead of condensing it to a few months in the fall, it will run from August all the way, I think, to April to be their national tournament in April. So the thought is to run the national tournament after March Madness, but before you get to the baseball and softball World Series, College World Series. And there's a gap of time that it could fit nicely into and do your stuff and have a big Final Four. And there even is some talk about maybe identifying a place, like, rather than rotating it around like March Madness does, if you had a home base like they have for college baseball, to do something like that. But those were not hard recommendations. Those are just some things that were talked about and floated around. But the big thing is a year-long season, and try to limit games to one a week, and not have them during finals, and not have them during any time that would really impact the academics. Plus, it gives players a chance to recover. I think in general, those are great. I think college soccer is just squished into this crazy rapid fire thing of games. They're usually playing 2 games a week, maybe more. And when do you get practice? And I don't think you can improve well as a college soccer player. There's just not that time for training. Now, how this ultimately works on a campus with a coach and the demands that are going to be of these athletes and being involved all year long, who knows? I mean, those are all things to be determined. But I do like the idea of a year-long season and a tournament in the spring to be your showcase piece for your national championship.
Yeah, I like the way they've broken out the system, and I actually really hope that as USL ideally moves towards more of a pyramid model, they kind of emulate some of the things being suggested here, because I think it's a really clever way of dividing up the regional areas, and I think that's going to be the key. I mean, that's where a lot of the cost saving comes in, right? Is saving on travel,
Right.
and like you mentioned, students actually have more time because they're traveling less to be students. And so I really like the way they've regionalized it. And not only do I hope they really just take that verbatim, or I'm sure it could be improved upon, but I'm not sure how. I hope to see that kind of emulated as we go forward with the USL structure as well.
I agree. And for that regionalization, to make sure it's clear to everyone in the audience, there's going to be 4 regions. Now, I imagine they're probably going to be very similar to how U.S. Soccer already regionalized things between regions 1, 2, 3, and 4, which are basically the East, the Midwest, the South, and the West. So they will split up the teams. This is on the men's side. The women are not going to do this quite the same way, because most of their conferences are still pretty strong in regional ways, at least right now. And they have twice as many, I think more than twice as many women's teams in the college level, 300 and some versus the, I don't know, 150 or whatever it is on the men's side. I can't remember exactly what it is, but there's there's going to be 4 regions. In each region, there'll be what's called a regional league. At least this is the proposal. There'll be a regional league of 8 to 10 teams, and that will be ideally your best D1 teams. And then below that will be probably 4-ish, what they're calling local leagues. And and the idea is to have promotion and relegation, depending how you do each season, between the regional league and the local leagues. Now, they did not identify exactly how that would work. And to start this off, the recommendation is just to ask people where they want to be. Do you want to be in a local league or do you want to be in the regional league? And then kind of take it from there. But that's the plan for regional leagues, with just one league there for each region, and then below that 4 local leagues that would feed up into that regional league. And that's what you were talking about, Dylan. And I do like that. And it will cut down the travel. And then this way, it's coordinated kind of from the top, instead of having, like we see in football or basketball even, but these power conferences where the best teams are trying to get with the other best teams, even if it means traveling halfway across the country to play matches, because they're afraid they're going to miss out on television money or something else if they stay within whatever their current conference is. So you're seeing teams bolt all over the place, which is also hurting the college game. So if they can remove the college teams from that other structure and have them play in their own conferences and keep them hyper regionalized, it will certainly save on costs and probably help keep those rivalries that have always existed between schools in place, instead of you know all these schools that used to be in the Pac-12 that are now, or 10 or 8 back, I remember. So
Who knows
um,
even? Yeah.
keep all these keep them close together and keep costs down as well. So I like all like that. I like the pro rel. One of the other things they recommend is changing the eligibility rules. So if someone signs for a youth academy, say with Major League Soccer or a USL club, it does not impact or hurt their college experience. So they could sign and try that for a couple of years, and if it doesn't work, they could leave and go back to college. Now, these all have to be voted on and agreed to, but that's one of the recommendations.
Now, see, I really like that change because the way
Yes.
college eligibility works right now is so obnoxiously strict that it really does limit players' opportunities.
Well, and it has to change because college used to be amateur,
Right,
right?
purely amateur.
And air quotes.
Whereas, and
But
I've had like several conversations this week about NIL in college sports through a variety of lenses. It's actually been a very NIL heavy conversation week, and I pointed to this fact several times because it's still, I can't wrap my head around it. The quarterback for the University of Miami Hurricanes this season is making $1 million more this season than Joe Flacco, who has won a Super Bowl.
wow.
Yeah. So anyway, the point being, like, if soccer doesn't do something, like, it's this has clearly been disastrous for kind of the social fabric of college football, and
Right.
the money can be dangerous if soccer doesn't handle it correctly.
Yes. It absolutely can. The other thing I like, because we see this problem with especially football at college, is what happens if a coach changes or anything else, in terms of how transferring to other schools, the whole portal thing that they have. The idea is to have transfer windows and
Love
align
that
them
too.
with the
Yes.
actual transfer windows that we have, through FIFA, and keep it consistent that way, so everybody knows, like, you can leave or change if you need to, but there's a transfer window. You don't leave outside of those transfer windows. So we're trying to standardize the sport a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think transfer windows make more sense than the whole like trade deadline thing that we do in American sports. So, yeah, I love that.
And then, to look at some of the pros and cons, most of the things we mentioned in by themselves, just looking at that, transfer windows, the pro rel, the hyper regionalization, I think all of those are great things. And I'm super happy to see US soccer kind of take the lead to help shape this. But all those are kind of looked at in isolation. And if you have some but not others, depending how this actually plays out, this is, we talk about you can build a good pyramid, an integrated thing, or you can build a sloppy one and everything just falls apart. So I think there are some good ideas. Plus, in the structure of the document, this is the proposal from this committee, but now it's out there for discussion. Like, that's the whole point. It's a starting place really for discussion and to see how things could move. So I'm sure some things will change even before 2026. No guarantee it'll even be adopted in the first place, but I would imagine there's probably a very good chance, because college soccer is going to need to save itself in
Right.
some way. Otherwise, it's going to get tossed aside.
To
They're
what
going to have to be proactive.
to what extent, if at all, do you think that this U.S. soccer rolling out this slate of recommendations to college soccer and seeing how that goes is them moving towards this kind of idea for U.S. soccer writ large, or is that me just being really optimistic?
Yeah, if I put an optimist hat on, I hope that's
Because it
ultimately
seems like it
what's
could be
starting
right,
here.
kind of like a litmus test type thing, so you see where we're at.
And I think this could
Mm-hmm.
be a starting place to really start having that broader conversation and integrating a larger US soccer sanctioned promotion relegation pyramid that's going to have to be outside of MLS, because MLS doesn't want it, unless they just get forced into it in terms of, like, as owners, they see it's not worth
Right.
it to us to stay outside of it. But that's a conversation down the road.
Sure.
But I also see this, again, put on the cynic hat. This also feels like it's laying potentially some groundwork to try to mimic basketball and football a little more and make college the feeder for professional leagues,
Sure.
especially on the women's side. But I
Sure.
just don't see that happening on the men's side. We've moved beyond that. We're
Yeah.
we're never going back to college soccer being the avenue for pros on the men's side. It's just
Yeah.
not going to
That's
happen.
very small minded, very Americanized sports thinking, if that's really where they're going with this.
Yes. So, to kind of get along with what you said, one of my cons for all of this is, even though we've got the regionalization, which I love, it's got the pro rel tiers. I also love that. I will, consolidate costs, everything else. This still, at least in how it's presented right now, is an isolated league, so to speak. It's a college league. So again, we're isolating another league, which I mean, technically it always was for college sports, but now that we have the chance to do something different, we're still trying to keep an isolated league, which I don't think that will be successful in the long run. I think financially for schools, when they look at this, you know, they still have to put some money. Before, legally, they had to put some money into different programs, not just Title IX wise, but other reasons. And then it was good to have, a good cross section of sports to offer and the whole student athlete piece. But when things are going to start being driven more by money and revenue streams, then I think that's going to dominate the conversation, but also facilities. I think facilities will dominate the
Yeah.
conversation, because colleges are going to they could have basically empty facilities that they're going to want to maybe leverage in a way they can make money off of. So again, I think
Right.
it's going to come down to money. Um, and I think this is where it's going to go eventually. I see it very quickly morphing into something new. I think there's an idea by people who've been involved in the college game for so long, they want to protect their kingdom, right? The
Right.
college game.
Right.
I, I don't, not that that can't be protected in some way, but it needs to be completely reimagined.
Right. It's
And
not. It
with,
can't be protected in this incarnation.
right, because who knows how scholarships are even going to work moving forward,
Yeah, for real.
right? It just, and they may just stop offering
Yeah.
scholarships to certain groups. I think from U.S. soccer's perspective, if you want to keep this going, there's a couple things you need to do. One, and it kind of goes to that first point, you got to make it, you know, a strong financial driver for the university. And I don't think the university fronting the entire cost of that soccer team is going to fly as we
No,
move forward.
not
It's
at
going to
all.
be looked at as a losing proposition when they could put that money into football or basketball or something else.
Absolutely. That's. I
But
mean,
I
that's how
think,
they try to do it now, even to get around the Title
yeah,
IX before it got changed.
but I think, and what I see probably happening, and it won't be every school, and we might lose a lot of soccer programs over time, but if the university can partner with another group, that they basically sponsor, run the club. I'll take San Diego State, like the Aztecs. So if there still was an Aztec soccer team, both on the men's and women's side, but it ran a little bit like a club, like a professional club, but it uses the university's facilities, and maybe there's a fee charged. Like we already have all these soccer facilities and everything all over the country. The university is going to want them to be used. Otherwise,
Right.
maybe they tear them down. But if they can partner with someone and use the university's name, and you have the Aztecs, you have the Bruins, you have the Trojans, you have all these different teams, and they, you know, maybe they rent the field a little bit, but they also do a revenue sharing of merch and whatever it is, because that's what it's going to be, right? It's
Sure.
going to be
It's gonna
money
take
and
something like
facilities.
that. Yeah.
But then I think those people need to be in a more integrated pyramid that, if Duke soccer can compete at the League One level, then, again, now we're talking USL and what USL does because we don't have the unified pyramid. This is where I think this really hurts us. We don't have the
Sure.
unified pyramid. And if we did, you could just say these soccer teams could just kind of move into the pyramid, and wherever they go up and down, they go up and down. Now, a lot of people I know will immediately be upset, but then you lose your college rivalries. And I'm going to say, yeah, I don't think you're going to have those anymore in 5 years
Well,
in a lot of cases
I mean, the
in the
way college
sport.
football's gone, I mean, they managed to keep, when the Pac-12 disintegrated, they managed to keep the local pair rivalries together, but
Yeah,
that wasn't a given, and I don't think it will last forever. So,
right. So that's kind of the big picture for me, right? I see this morphing very fast, but also we just don't have a place to put them. I mean, they
right,
college soccer could almost start a new Division 4 for us on the pyramid, and then let
another
people
one,
move up and down. But you have it because they want to keep it under 23s, and I think that is in the long term going to be a problem. I think
right?
you're going to have a team that represents the university, but I also wonder, okay, if you do year long soccer, one of the reasons USL 2 was so successful in all these summer leagues is you're giving college soccer players a chance to play in the spring and summer.
Yep.
That's going to disappear. So, you know, I could see a situation where maybe a Vermont Green partners with the local university, which I think they're playing at a university,
Yeah, I
and
think they're
maybe
right.
Vermont Green becomes that university's team as well. And maybe it's not limited to just under 23, even though it's mostly there that way. But I really think they ought to have the ability to move up and down a pyramid. And the only way that works is if USL is going to accept them. Like that's a
Right.
whole other conversation because, and if you don't, then you're setting competing pro rel leagues. And you talked about the quarterback from Miami getting paid more than Flacco. well, who's to say if it's not successful promotion, relegation, pyramid in college soccer, that those teams, if they start accepting players who are outside of 23, don't become more like professional teams and start overshadowing
Right.
USL, right?
Right.
Because why go to the USL game when I could go see the San Diego State Aztecs and they've got some of the best players in the world playing on their team? I mean,
And it's a
that's
more local representation, right?
right.
In
So,
theory.
in theory, and right, there would be a lot to take place on whether that happens or not. But this is hugely concerning for me in the terms of something like USL2, MPSL, all those leagues that run the spring summer schedule,
Sure.
the league for clubs. Like what are they going to do now? These college soccer players going to be playing college soccer and they're probably going to want the summer off.
Right.
There's no reason to play in those leagues anymore. So the flip side of that is I see a tremendous opportunity. There's so many good USL2 clubs that are there that they could partner with universities, and now you're helping them both out. You're helping out a
Right.
pre-professional club that could then now become part of that system. Again, if we're talking USL, and then work together with the university so there's cross promotion and cross branding, and you could do university specific things like in hospitality sectors to where give internships and do all kinds of things with that club if there's a strong partnership with the university. So I think there's potential and options here. Plus, you can run men's and women's teams, under one umbrella like you've always done, and identify, in most cases, I would say, with the university and have that historic university branding. There's just there's some kinks and some logistics that will have to be worked out. And at least on the proposal that U.S. Soccer has presented here, I just don't see it happening
No.
in the way it's presented. It's professional. Like we're moving from amateur to professional at the college level. Then I think you need to think that way, like a
Right.
professional team as opposed
Right.
to a college team, but a professional team that has strong ties to a university where you can have a lot of crossover.
And that is
That
a
would
very
be
foreign concept to American sports. So I think that's going to be hard for people to wrap their heads around.
right. And we do see that around the world. Not a lot of them, certainly.
Sure.
But we do, and usually it was a team started by students and then
Right.
professionalized and still may have some connection with the university. But I think because of our situation in this country, it could be a unique model that, well, I think would work. Just, back of napkin kind of, penciling things out.
Yeah.
But outside of that, it's the college game is not going to be, especially for soccer. I mean, football and basketball will kind of still be similar, but they're going to professionalize, like you said, the quarterback making all that
Sure.
money.
Yeah. It's coming.
Yeah. So anyway, that's kind of the big picture with all of that. And I think if MLS has its way, they'll try to keep college in place as long as possible, because otherwise that does gravitate kind of to the USL side.
Right.
So I think that will happen. Okay. Any last comments you have on this before we start wrapping things up?
No, not really. You actually have offered a lot of new perspective here that I hadn't thought about. So I'll have to mull over some of these things.
Okay. We are going to do a little call to action this week because we already have ideas of what we're going to do for next week's show. Next week, we are going to go back to talking about Pro Rel a little bit differently than what we've done, where we kind of take a historical look at different countries. But we're going to look at USL. We're going to look at, with the season just finishing, what would have happened for promotion relegation, in a
Right.
theoretical kind of way between the championship and League One, and with the new teams coming in. But also, Morning Kick Around. They have a YouTube channel, so you can go look them up. They also just did a new video that, let me get my mouse together here and find the exact name of it. but the name of the video is The Huge Questions Facing USL Ahead of Promotion and Relegation. They released it just a few days ago, about 9-ish questions, I think, that U.S. soccer and USL need to answer if promotion and relegation is going to be successful. I think it's a good little video to not try to say, here's my plan, but like, hey, here are some of the questions. What are your thoughts? And they've had a good discussion on the YouTube channel about it. I know if you're a member of Morning Kick Around, they have a Discord. I'm not a member. But if you are a member, they have a Discord and there's a lot of conversations going. I think the video is really good about talking points and generating ideas. Like, well, okay, how are we going to solve this? Or how would this possibly work? So your homework assignment is to go and watch this video because we are going to go through some of those questions on next week's episode and kind of give our feedback on what we think might be answers to some of those questions or how they could be answered in order to make promotion and relegation work successfully in USL at the supposed launch date of 2028 with their new First Division League, if that is all still on track, which is, one of the basic questions. Is that actually on track?
Yeah,
so
fingers crossed.
Yeah. So I think it's good. Like I said, pretty short. So we'll put a link in the show notes, and I gave you all the information so you could just search for it on YouTube as well. Go ahead and check out that video, and we'll use that as a springboard for our conversation next week. All right, Dylan, is there... actually, what we usually do is soccer plans for the upcoming week. What do you have going on?
Well, I might look to go to that SC Inter game, like I mentioned. I'm gonna look into that. So,
okay, let me know what you have plans, and I've got several things in the air, so it depends how other bigger things play out on whether I'll be available or not on that day. But certainly on Saturday, I'm going to be tuning in at least through an app or something for USL Championship and USL League One, since it's the final matches of the season, and see how the playoffs are shaping up. And of course, I don't know, Sunday, I'm toying with the idea of going to the tailgate for STFC, not the match.
Sure.
But again, I don't know. I got to check a couple of things. And again, I never know how my health is going to be until the day of, but I have it in the back of my mind. I went to the opening match to the tailgate to check things out, but it'd be nice to see some people I haven't seen in a while. So I might do that. But of course, always I'll be reaching out to some people and trying to see if we can get people to go to, not this weekend, but next weekend's qualifying round 3 match between SD Inter and City SD. Okay. That are my plans. So that wraps up another episode for us here on the LGS pod. If you have questions or comments about tonight's episode, please drop us a note. You can drop us a comment here on our YouTube channel. You can also reach us over at Blue Sky, at soccershorts@bigpinedigital.com. Or if you're listening to us on a podcast app, you can send us a text using the send us a text link at the top of the episode description. And better yet, if you are available, consider joining us at 6 o'clock on Tuesdays on our YouTube channel when we actually record our live stream. All right, Dylan, any final comments before we head out? Oh, I think we might have lost Dylan there, so I guess I will be closing up the show myself here. So let me get in here and get everything set up, which I usually do while Dylan is speaking. But I'd like to thank everyone for joining us once again for Local Grassroots Stories, and we will see everyone next week. Good night.